Well, good evening, everyone. It's Wednesday night. It's our time for our evening Bible study. This is the last lesson on the book of Daniel. I don't know exactly what we're going to be doing next week. I know that we're coming back on Wednesday night for our Wednesday night Bible classes, but I have really enjoyed this series in Daniel. I've learned so much, and I hope you have as well. I just want you to walk through a few things with me here. Where have we come from, and before we wrap this study up, and we started all the way back talking about our identities that are given to us by God, and how we settle in our core values, again, given to us by God, and then we stand the test. We stand up for what we believe, and we looked at Daniel in the very beginning of who he was and what he stood for. After that, we talked about who do we worship and what do we worship in our life, and it is where do we identify ourselves? Do we identify ourselves with our pride? Do we identify ourselves with God? Who is in control of our life? And that was a really big one when we look at all of this and who's truly in control. Is it God? Is it us? Our desires, the culture of this world, our sin, our temptation, and we went all the way through that, looking at our focus on our priorities. Where is our priorities? Where are we spending our time and our money? And that really dictates to us who's actually in control. And then we've been talking about just going so fast. And this life really makes us go into a very fast pace. Maybe we need to slow down and just be still and know that who is God and that God is our God and that He needs to be the only thing in our life. And we actually begin with God and then we add the other aspects of our life. And so tonight, as we come to a close, I just want to tie up a few loose ends and really look at Daniel and ask the question, why do we look at this study? And I've realized two things. It's not about me, and it's about my purpose in my life, which is to give hope. And when you look at Daniel, he really gives hope. He gives hope to the Jewish nation that's in captivity in Babylon. He gives hope even into the future of when they rebuild the nation. And he gives hope to us. And when we look at his life and what he went through and how he overcame so many obstacles. And so I want to look at tonight, it's just why do we do the lesson and why do we look at all these lessons? And it's really for us to be able to understand how to connect with people. I want you to understand something. In the 70 years that Daniel is going to be captive, he shares his faith with every single king, every authority in Babylon during that time. I want you to look at this with me just for a second. So if you have your Bibles, look at Daniel chapter 2, okay? Daniel chapter 2, 47 through 48. And this is with King Nebuchadnezzar. He has interpreted a dream, and I want you to see what the king answers Daniel at this time. He says, the king answered to Daniel, truly your God is God, the God of the Lord of kings, and the revealer of mysteries. You've been able to reveal this mystery. Then the king gave David high honors and gave great gifts and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon and the chief prefect over the wise men of Babylon. Look at it's King Nebuchadnezzar that says, your God is the God. And then he places authority and puts a lot of trust into Daniel. And again, we see this over and over again. And Nebuchadnezzar sees it again, not just in Daniel, but Daniel's friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But then look over here to King Belshazzar. I want to look over to Daniel chapter 5. And King Belshazzar, he does not give any glory to God, nothing at all. But I want you to see something that Daniel says to him in his speech. When he sees the handwriting on the wall, and he's trying to get that interpreted, Daniel comes to do that, and he said, if you interpret these things, I'm going to give you all these gifts. And Daniel literally says in verse 17, you can keep your gifts. But listen to verse 18, the wording that he used. O king, always with reverence and respect, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar your father the kingship and greatness and the glory and majesty. And he goes on from here, and he tells him what God has done for his father. But listen to the word that he used, the Most High God. There's no other gods but God. Down here to verse, I believe it's verse 21. He's talking about King Nebuchadnezzar, and he was driven out of his kingdom. He ate grass till he knew that the Most High God rules the kingdom of mankind and sets over it whom he wills. So he says King Nebuchadnezzar literally lost his mind. Your dad lost his mind until he realized the Most High God is in control, and then he brings him back. And at the end here in verse 29, after he tells him what the writing on the wall means, and we've studied that, which was a fantastic study when we break it down, that our days are numbered, and we're supposed to use them to the best of our ability. And then he says he was given great honor, and he was clothed with purple, a chain of gold was put around his neck. Proclamation was made about him that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom, and he was placed with honor. No, King Belshazzar did not see that God is God, but he was preached and taught about God. Then you go to King Darius in chapter 6, and King Darius is an incredible man. I just like him so much. And he has a respect for Daniel. He has a respect for Daniel's God. Look at Daniel chapter 6, verse 16. And this is the point at this point. In verse 16, you have to understand already at this point, the satraps have already manipulated King Darius into everyone praying to him for 30 days. Daniel does not do it, and the law was that you were thrown into the den of lions. And this is what the king commanded Daniel. He was brought and cast into the den of lions. The king declared to Daniel, listen to this, may your God, whom you serve continually, deliver you. And there's a respect that he has for Daniel. And he says, may the God that you serve take care of you. Now drop down to verse 20. And you see this respect again. As he came near to the den, and actually he's been up all night. He's been worried about Daniel. He's been fasting, and he couldn't even sleep. In the first thing in the morning, he runs to the lion's den, and he breaks open the door there. When he came near to the den where Daniel was, he cried out in a tone of anguish. The king declared to Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God. Listen to that. Servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions? And do you see this? There's a respect because Daniel serves this God, our God, continually. He saw it all of the time, and he saw the kind of man that it created for him. Now listen to what he says at the very end. I'm going to start in verse 26. He goes, I will make a decree that the royal dominion over the people are tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall never be destroyed, and his dominion shall be to the end. He delivers and rescues, and he works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. Who has saved Daniel from the power of the lions? And so we find another king being influenced by Daniel because of his relationship with God. Now, when you read verse 28, we don't have a lot about King Cyrus, but we know that he makes an influence there as well, because verse 28 says, so this Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. Now, if you go all the way back to Daniel chapter 1, and I believe it's about 21, it will tell you there that he's going to reign 1 year in King Cyrus's time. But you see here, the scripture says he prospered during that time. Again, making an influence on the king of Babylon and on those officials at that time. And so how does Daniel do this? How does he connect with these people and make a difference in their lives? And how can we also make that connection and difference? Well, with exceptional qualities, we're going to see that in just a little bit, in godly character. And Daniel displayed that, and he gained their trust and respect, especially with King Darius. He says, you continually serve. This was something that he did all the way through his life. And Daniel literally said, this is who I am, this is what I believe in, and this is what I'm going to do. And as a Christian, I see that and go, I need to be doing the same thing. It's hard for us sometimes just to step up and say, this is what we're going to do. But that's what we need to do. We need to make a difference and influence in people around us. Now, we don't have all of the conversations recorded that Daniel's going to have with these four very distinct leaders of Babylon. But he obviously did something right. When you look at his responses, when he talks to these kings, Uh, they must have reflected respect, humility, diplomacy, but without compromise. If you look at what Scripture says to us about this relationship between Daniel and these kings, he doesn't argue with them. He doesn't have to explain anything. He doesn't criticize these kings for what they believe or what they're doing, nor does he condemn them. Um, but he stands for what he believes, and he speaks on God's behalf. No matter what that is, he speaks on God's behalf. It's interesting, you go back to Daniel chapter 6 with King Darius. How does the other satraps have a relationship? What kind of relationship do they have with Darius? Well, they use manipulation and mistrust to get what they want. They use manipulation and mistrust. They don't like Daniel, so how are we going to get Daniel? Well, we'll get him to make a law that can't be broken, that we know we can trap Daniel. Well, that's the world. The world uses mistrust, manipulation constantly. Well, what happens to those satraps? They and their families are thrown into the den of lions. They are destroyed. The relationships around them, destroyed. Who they are from the inside, destroyed. And when we don't understand who we are and we're trying to get what we want, this is what's going to happen. We're going to use these tactics of manipulation, of mistrust. I want to get what I want. And that's when we fall away from God the most, and we find ourselves wandering. So often I ask people, how are you? Where are you in your life when they're having difficult times? And they say, I don't even know who I am. Daniel knew who he was. And he understood that the way he represented God matters. The way we represent God matters. He understood that his character, he understood his attitude, demeanor mattered as much as his words and his actions. And Daniel becomes a person of influence in a very pagan, rich culture of Babylon. But he maintains his convictions. He exercises his faith in a manner that really reflected his honesty, his openness. He was very open with what he believed. And so we can learn so much from Daniel. And I think this whole study on Daniel and his personality and his characteristics has been such a joy to study. But because of what God has done for us, just like what God has done for Daniel, having a new beginning with him, understanding his love that he has for us through his son's sacrifice for us, it makes a change in our lives as well. And we need to practice what Daniel practices. And you may be saying right now, but John, I'm not Daniel. I'm not a minister like you. I don't have any special talents or qualities. I'm sorry. I just don't buy into that anymore. I don't buy into it at all, because I believe with all my heart what Scripture teaches us. And you look at Mark chapter 16, verse 15, he says, I want you to go into all the world and proclaim the gospel to the whole creation, everyone. It's not just for ministers and not just for those who are talented or maybe those who do not have fear. He goes, well, that's our job that we're supposed to have. And we're not supposed to have a huge story, or most of us like me, I don't have even a convicting story. I was raised in the church. I had a great family. I didn't come from a horrible background or anything like that. I don't have a story, but I know what Christ has done for me. And God is just calling us to be real, calling us to be who we are. And what has God done for us? And that's the story that we share. I love what 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 20 says. Therefore, we are ambassadors for Christ, God making his appeal through us. A few years ago, Sally took a group of students to Washington. And then she asked me to be a chaperone. I said, absolutely. So I went. And as we're going through Washington, I saw a building, and there were these Canadian flags all over the building. And I said, what is that? And she said, that's the embassy for Canada. And I thought, wow, that is so cool. Nobody else thought it was as cool as I did, but I just loved it. And I thought, that's the embassy. It's a little piece of Canada right there. What's an embassy? Well, actually, it's literally a piece of Canada in the United States, just like America has an embassy in Canada. And that belongs to United States there. But inside that embassy, there are ambassadors, and that ambassador goes out, and in this case, goes to the government of United States and says, this is what we believe, this is what we think, here is the message that we need to give to you from Canada. And that's exactly what we are. For me, the embassy is the church gathered together. That's where I find my strength and my encouragement. But then we leave as ambassadors into this world, and we teach people about who Christ is and what he's done for us. We say we act like God because that's who we belong to. Just as the ambassador acts in a way because he represents Canada, we act in a way because we represent our God. We share what we believe. We take his message and we give it to the people who want to hear it and say, here's the message that we have from God. And that's what he's calling us to do. He's calling us to go to the people who want to hear the message, to seek and save that which is lost. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever lost anything? Have you ever lost a child? I have, for briefly. We were in Canada. We were visiting my parents. We were in a mall, and my wife and I, we thought the other one had her. We were all in one store. We left, and we're standing outside trying to figure out where we're going to go. And I looked over at my wife, and I said, where is she? Do you have her? And she goes, no, I thought she was with you. So we checked with the family. Nobody had her. So you know that feeling. You just have that sick feeling in your stomach. It drops, and you start to panic, and you start going through all these things through your mind of, what if I can't find her? Where is she? Did somebody take her? Is she okay? Is she crying? I know she's alone. What's going to happen? So we run back to the store. We can't find her, and just a few minutes inside the store, which felt like a lifetime, I hear, hey, Daddy, I found something I like. She didn't even realize we were gone. She wasn't scared. I almost wanted to cry when I found her, but it was so scary. Probably about 5-10 minutes, but I was scared so much. And all I wanted to do was find my daughter. Where is she? I want her back. If my brother came to me and said, hey, John, I understand you're scared. I know we're trying to find your daughter, but we're all really hungry. Do you mind if we go down to the food court and get us something to eat, and then we'll come back? Because we're kind of hungry, and that's what we need to do. Do you mind? We'll come back and search for your kid. And we know that's important, but I'm going to go and get something to eat. I need to take care of this. Is that okay? I would have lost it on him. I would have been angry. I would have yelled at him, like, you got to be kidding me. The most important thing is to find my daughter right now. I need your help. Do you think that's how God feels? Hey, God, I know this is really important. I know that you want me to go to seek and save those who are lost. I know that there's something that I need to do, and this is what you've asked me to do. This is the most important thing for me to do. Not only to have a relationship with you, but then to share it with somebody else. But you know what? I'm kind of hungry. Can you take care of this instead? Can you take care of this? And we don't do what Christ is asking us to do. And I feel like that's maybe what God feels like. I have one task. I want you to seek and save those who are lost. Please do it. Not with just a little bit, but everything that we have. Practice what I teach you. Be my ambassador so that we can make a big impact in this life. Daniel makes an impact. And I think God calls us to make an impact as well. Not just to say, hey, this is what I want, God, with my relationship. He wants me to share that with others. So how do we make an impact? I want 3 really easy ways that we can help you with this. And I've learned from the book of Daniel, and then the lesson will be yours, okay? First one is this. Just simply connect with people. That's what Daniel does. Daniel just connects with people. Everyone is longing for unconditional love. They're longing for relationships. So what do we need to do as Christians? Show some interest, show some compassion, show some kindness and some honesty with people. They're just looking for somebody who will listen and try to understand them. And that's exactly what Jesus models for us in all of his relationships. When you look to what he does, Jesus understood that the relationship must come first. He wants to connect with people before he corrects them. And that's what we need to do as well. We need to connect before we really get into the correction part of that relationship. Look with me over in a passage of scripture in Luke 19. And this really demonstrates what Jesus does. Starting in verse 1, Luke 19, starting in verse 1. He entered Jericho, and they was passing through. And behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was rich. He was seeking to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd, he could not because he was small in stature. I want you to see this. He was seeking. He's heard about Jesus Christ. A lot of people in this world, they know who Jesus is, but they don't have a connection. And just like Zacchaeus, they want to see Christ. And that's where we come in. When we come in, we show interest with them and we talk to them. We show them the kindness that Jesus is about to show Zacchaeus here. A lot of people are searching, and it's us that makes that connection. Not to just so that we can have that relationship, but that we connect them with God. So let's see what happens. So he ran on ahead and climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him. And he was about to pass that way. When Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today. So he hurried and came down and received him joyfully. Question, how many times do we just bypass people? Nobody's looking at Zacchaeus. Nobody cares that he's up there. How many people in that crowd are not even looking or paying attention to Zacchaeus? But Jesus, as he's passing by, looks up and he says, I want to talk to you. I only think about how many people I've let pass by. Or I just kept on walking and had a purpose. Jesus has a purpose right now. He came into Jerusalem. He's passing through Jerusalem. He's doing something, but he stops and he says, I'm going to connect. And what's the response? Most people are going to be responding joyfully because they want that connection. He comes down out of the tree. He received him joyfully. And when they saw it, they all grumbled. He has gone to be a guest of a man who is a sinner. Who cares what the world thinks and who cares what everybody else thinks? Connect with people. Connect with people. Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, Behold, Lord, half my goods I give to the poor, and if I have defrauded anyone or anything, I will restore it for full fold. And Jesus said to him, Today salvation has come to this house, since he also is a son of Abraham, for the Son of Man came to seek and save that which is lost. And here you are. Once we introduce Jesus Christ, people change. And that's what happens to Zacchaeus. He says, I'm going to not just give back, I'm going to give back. And if I cheated anyone, I'm going to give back even more. Jesus changes him from the inside out. And that's what he can do for everyone. And that's the message that we have. Why? What is the purpose? He came to do one thing. Seek and save the lost. And guess what? That's my purpose as well. Connecting with people to save them and bring them into a relationship with Jesus Christ. Number 2, live according to what God teaches. Please live according to what God has taught us. I can't stand when people say I'm a Christian and then they go out and do the opposite things in their life. They go out and get drunk, or they go out and they're sleeping around, or they're going out and cussing up a storm, or they just don't live as what they proclaim. When you look at Daniel, he lives what he proclaims. When the world sees Christians and say one thing and do another, they call us a hypocrite, and they want nothing to do with us, and therefore have nothing to do with Jesus Christ, because they look at that as a religion, not a relationship, and they say, if that's what it looks like, I want nothing a part of it. And so it is so important that we earn someone's respect before we build that relationship. And again, that's what Daniel does. He earns that respect. Even in Daniel chapter 1, with the eunuch that was taking care of him, he earned that respect because of what he stood up for and what he did. And so therefore that person became closer to Daniel, got to know them, and said, okay, there's something special here. And that's what we're supposed to do. We can't say one thing and then do another. It's going to turn people away. I love what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 5 and verse 16. He says, let your light shine before others. So we're supposed to let our light shine. And we can do that in so many different ways. Usually we think it's just talking, but it's not. Listen to what he says, that they may see your good deeds. We're supposed to be acting and doing things so they can see our good deeds, not because it's for us, but why? And glorify your Father in heaven, so that they can see that there's a God living in us and through us, that he has a place with us. He goes, we're going to let our light shine. We're going to make a difference. We're going to have an influence on others because of what we're doing, so that they then can glorify God through the life that we're living. So then, if we can do that, then what we have the opportunity to do is the same thing the apostles did in the book of Acts. Beginning of the book of Acts, he says, Jesus tells them in chapter 1 that you're going to be my witnesses. Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria, but most of all to the end of the earth. And so he's saying the same thing for us. Let our light shine, so therefore we can be witnesses for him. We tell people about our story. Again, ambassadors. We are his ambassadors, appealing to them for God. So practice what you preach is what we call that. Third thing is this. Invite others to a place where they can experience God for themselves. Far too often what we think this is maybe to worship. Come to worship with me. Come to church, what we call that. And we know the church is the people. We've been studying that. Statistics will tell us, and especially with church growth books, they will say that is very intimidating for somebody to come into a worship setting where they don't know what's going on. They don't know the people that are there. People are looking at them. They're trying to figure out things. They're uncomfortable maybe because they don't know the songs that we're singing and such. And so it's very intimidating. And so bringing them to worship is great. And that's a good thing. But connecting them with God outside of that is actually what they say the greatest growth you can have. That's a time when somebody will listen to the lessons of Jesus Christ, to the lessons that you're going to be able to teach them. So how do you do that? Well, you can serve with them. Right now, with everything going on with COVID, there's opportunities for us to serve. Take some time, take them with you, whatever you're doing, and serve with them. We have a place down in Fort Worth called Fortress, and we deliver meals to inner city kids in activity packets. Take them with you. Talk to them. Why are you doing this? Why do you want to do this? And you have that opportunity to serve something more locally, maybe a mission that is here in Bowie. Serve in that mission. Volunteer and serve with them. Serve our community. Serve the people who are in need. And allow them to see why you're doing it. Tell them why you're doing it. And they get to see God through you. Have dinner with them and invite some of your brethren over with you, and they can see what Christians are really like. That we're not perfect, that we're just people, that we enjoy the same things in this life. And they can build relationships there, and that you have that opportunity to bring God into that conversation there. You have just a Bible study at a coffee shop. I had a friend one time say this guy said, "Who is God?" He goes, "That was a nature hike." And they went hiking, and he was able to talk about God, but able to experience God in nature and to show him things. And through that first hike and many others, he became a Christian because he got to see God, he got to experience God through those times. Having a Bible study on your couch, in your home, just introducing them to God, but have an opportunity to help them experience who God is through your life, and understand his love by the things that you do. And that's really a great opportunity. So the three things I would tell you is this: just connect. People are wanting a connection, but practice what you preach. Don't say one thing and do another, and have those opportunities where you can show them who God is and they can experience God with you and alongside of you. Okay. I want to read something from a book I read getting ready for these classes, and it's just outstanding. And so I want to read this to you and then end off our study in Daniel chapter 6, okay? In the world we live in today, with so much compromise and back and forth between people on various sides and issues at hand, the only hope for culture to improve its spiritual revolution, one leading to strong, loving, confident Christians, the kind of followers that Jesus who enter into culture and engage with everyone around them like a breath of fresh air, people who aren't perfect and don't claim to be, just men and women, boys and girls trying to love God with their whole heart, mind, and lives. People like you and me. This is what I love about Daniel. Most likely, he never imagined himself as a prisoner of war, someone whose strong faith not only withstand the numerous cultural pressures around him, but also impressed on those holding them captive. Can you imagine the pain of being taken into slavery or transported into a completely different culture? Can you imagine how it felt to be separated from family, friends, and home? Can you imagine how insecure he must have felt to live in a culture that mocked his religion and despised his lifestyle? Yet Daniel was a man of influence, a counterculture conduit for God in an ungodly world. I love that. How did he do it? with all that going against him, how did he become someone who would influence 4 administrations of government in a pagan culture? Simple. He let God transform him into the person God had always intended him to be. That's what we've been talking about all this time, allowing God to transform us into what he wants so that we can serve him and be an influence. And if we'll live in the same space of surrender, God will also transform us into the likeness for the purpose of influencing the culture around us. By my definition, this is what true leadership is all about. Influencing the culture around you. And that's what we've been trying to do in our study. Allowing God to create in us, in his image, his likeness, so that we can influence the people around us. I want to go to Daniel. Go back with me one more time to Daniel, the 6th chapter. I want to read the first 3 verses. Daniel chapter 6, verses 1 through 3. And it pleased Darius to set the kingdom of 120 satraps to be throughout the whole kingdom, and over them 3 high officials, of whom Daniel was one of them, to whom the satraps would give account, and that the king might suffer no loss. Then this Daniel became distinguished above all the other high officials and satraps because of his excellent spirit was within him. And the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. I thought to myself, that's what he was talking about in that book. That's who Daniel was. Daniel distinguished himself. It didn't say he was naturally distinguished. It didn't say he was unique. It didn't say he was special. And when we think of being distinguished, sometimes we think it's appearance. We think in terms of natural ability or maybe even educational. They're very distinguished. While distinguishing oneself typically relies on what we do and how we do it. There's a big difference, and I hope you saw that difference. It's talking about our attitude. It's talking about our words. It's talking about our behaviors and how we do things. We don't need to be some super Christian with amazing abilities. I like what he says, these exceptional qualities, exceptional spirit was in Daniel. And these qualities were really simple. Following God and remain faithful and firm in his faith. And he followed through with what God wanted him to do. And when you look at this, not only does he have that influence on a king, but then he has even a greater influence. So I want you to know tonight as we wrap up this whole study is that when we make a change in ourselves and we start making the influence in the people around us, just in our own little circle, it can become even a greater influence. Like Daniel, over and over again, his influence was over so many. Kings blessed him because of who he was. And I know that we can bless others in our life with a life that we can live for God. Be distinguished like Daniel and rise above this culture. Become godly men and women and influence the people around you and the next generation. I hope you've enjoyed this study in Daniel. May God bless you and take care of you.